Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Show, your source for insightful analysis and enlightening discussions. Hello, I'm Michael Bull, your host to the world of commercial real estate. Thanks for joining us on one of the 42 radio stations on iTunes or on YouTube or on the show website, creshow.com. Well, we have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about mixed-use developments. You know, it really seems that mixed-use developments are all the rage with empty nesters, with millennials, with everyone as we're trying to get out of our cars, right, and make life more convenient. Well, please welcome my first guest. It's Nick Egelanian. He is president with SiteWorks, and they're headquartered in Maryland. He joins us on Skype. Nick, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, Mike.
And how'd I do with that name?
You were perfect.
That's great. And Nick, you work with retailers, you work with developers. To start us out, just how popular are mixed-use developments with landlords, with tenants, compared to traditional retail these days?
Well, I wouldn't say they're more popular compared to traditional retail. What I would say is that they are the most popular new development format today. Traditional retail, there's hundreds of millions of square feet of it still out there, and it's still very popular. But in terms of development opportunities today, it's probably the hotspot.
Right. And we're talking about mixed-use development today. So which types of retail do you see that are most prominent and work well and do the best in mixed-use developments?
Well, as you know, Mike, I tend to separate retail into what I call commodity and specialty. And clearly, it's specialty retail that is most adaptable to that type of environment.
Right. And tell us about these types of retailers. So you have the commodity retail, and you're talking more of the necessity type retail, right?
Yeah, so in necessity retail, the customer is most interested in the mix of price and convenience that delivers the goods that they use on a regular basis most efficiently for them. In specialty retail, it's completely different. It's all about spending their discretionary time and discretionary income. And so in that type of a situation, they're much more interested in how the entire experience feels to them. And they judge it by really how happy or how satisfying it is at the end. So mixed-use environments are very conducive to that.
Now, you would think if you're a resident in a mixed-use development, you'd like to have some of that necessity retail around you. But are you telling us that if you're a necessity retailer, mixed use aren't your first choice? You'd rather be on some corner somewhere?
Well, the devil's in the detail. There are successful commodity retail concentrations in mixed-use projects, but my experience throughout the country and around the world is that they tend to do better when they're segregated or segmented within the project. So, for example, the customer who's going out to dinner at Main Street within a mixed-use project, and 3 corners of the Main Street are specialty apparel retailers and restaurants, don't necessarily get excited about seeing a Walmart or a Target entrance on the 4th corner. On the other hand, they're very happy about having that entrance just around the corner. So it's really about how you present it more than what you're presenting.
Okay. And if you will, Nick, tell us about some successful developments that you've seen lately that retail is working well in some of these mixed-use developments.
Well, I think one of the most interesting ones, there are so many of them around the country, but in Atlanta, Georgia, there's one called Avalon. And in Avalon, they've done a wonderful job of creating a mixed-use environment with mostly residential above retail. They have commodity retail in the form of some furniture stores and a Whole Foods, but those are out in front of the project with ample parking in front of them. And the Main Street is reserved for specialty retailers and restaurants and a movie theater. And what you'll find in Avalon is that the Main Street is beautifully articulated, beautifully detailed. When you walk down it, you really feel like you're on an avenue that's been there for a long time. And when you're shopping the Whole Foods out in front, you feel like it's very convenient to you and gives you what you need it at the speed you need it. So that's one great example. Another great example is in Boston, Massachusetts, Federal Realty's Assembly Row, which is the first mixed-use center in the country that has combined off-price retailing or outlet merchandising with the other traditional mix of uses, including residential, office, and in this case, a transit station.
Well, that's interesting, and Nick, and talk to us about that a little bit. So I think you think of off-price or value retailers as being these outlet centers. You don't think about it as much in these mixed-use developments. That you're starting to see that, and is that starting to work?
That is not only starting to work, but my feeling is that it could become one of the dominant mixed-use formats in the next couple of decades. The reasons for that are because it's bringing together two or three trends that are converging and allowing it to happen. The first is that up until recently, you really couldn't put that type of apparel retailing so close to a city or in an urban area because it competed with the wholesale distribution channels or the retail distribution channels, the full line retail distribution channels of those retailers. Those barriers have largely fallen. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that retailers are out of traditional places to expand. If you are a retailer that appeals to the top 10% of the income strata and you want to expand your business and you're in all of the locations where you can do that in the top 10%, well, one way to do it is to create a outlet line and appeal to another 10, 20, 30%. So we have these things coming together, which and lastly, the customer is accepting it. The customer says, it's okay with me.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I think we're all okay walking into a value store now, right? Maybe not everybody wants to walk into a dollar store, but they certainly want to walk in and get a great deal on their clothes, right?
Yeah, put it in the perspective of someone who maybe can't afford to buy the full line Coach product, but can afford to buy an outlet version of the project. Well, for them, they're realizing all their aspirations at a reasonable price point. So really, it's a win-win for the retailer and the consumer in that case.
Right. And Nick, let's talk about some of the more important aspects for retailers. You know, when they're looking at locations, and if you can key more in some of these mixed-use developments, what are some key aspects that these retailers are looking for and should consider when they're making these decisions?
Well, when you're in commodity retail, you're really just interested about getting your customers in the front door. When you're in a specialty retail environment, and particularly in a mixed use, you're interested in aggregating folks around a mix of uses. So retailers, depending on who they are, will want anything from the same kind of center court arrangement that they would have in a mall to something off of that. And really the same principles that drove them to seek a center court versus a 30-yard location in a mall, same principles are really at work in mixed use.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit more about this convergence era that you're talking about, where you're kind of mixing uses that maybe weren't as mixed before.
Well, now keep in mind that we have a parallel development going on in the shopping business, in the retail business, that's also part of this. We have a 30-year process of the decline of what we now call the B and C malls, and we're really at the last maybe 10 or 20% of that decline. So we're going to see still a large number of B and C malls. These are malls that are doing anywhere from under $100 a square foot to $200 a square foot. They tend to be anchored by Sears, JCPenney, maybe a Macy's, maybe two Macy's, could be a Dillard's. But these are centers that have been declining in volume for some time and are likely to end their useful life sometime in the next 15 to 20 years. If you take the number of those around the country, we could be talking hundreds. And then try to replace the retail square footage. The most likely way for that to happen is to replace it with what I'm calling this convergence era outlet merchandising, similar to what was done in Assembly Row. So I think you could see hundreds of these done in the next 20 years.
So you bring in some more outlet mall type of tenants.
Yeah, because today the model has changed from 30 years ago. 30 years ago, in order to drive traffic to a central shopping facility, you needed department stores. Well, the very function of the department stores has changed over the 30 years. All of the departments that were in department stores when I was a kid are now in big boxes out on the street.
Right.
So the outlet format does not require that type of anchoring. And in fact, you now see in mixed-use centers anchoring that's very non-traditional. Outlet soft goods merchandising with everything from movie theaters to experiences like Lego Discovery Zone or Crayola Experience. So I think we're looking at a whole new era of merchandising and mixed use going forward.
Give us your one-sentence answer to municipalities that want retail in their mixed use, how to do it right.
Well, I'm gonna say this, but I'm gonna say it respectfully.
Okay.
Um, Municipalities have very thoughtful and very caring planners, but the planners often have adopted a concept called new urbanism that forces retail and forces buildings to the street to create walkable places. And that is a very noble goal. But I would say that 75 to 80% of the projects of that type that I see around the country fail in their very purpose of creating walkability. So I think the municipalities need to be disciplined in enforcing creating walkable places, but realistic in where they can happen, and recognize that commodity retail is inconsistent with it, while specialty retail is very consistent with it. So if they get a little smarter about where they apply it, I think they'll get much better results and more of what they're looking for.
Well said and good advice. Nick, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you much. Thanks for having me.
Well, stay tuned. We'll have more on mixed-use developments. I'm Michael Bull. This is the Commercial Real Estate Show. Stay with us. The Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by Bull Realty, a great place to do business. RealNex, software for productivity. Xceligent, information for the professionals. And Commercial Search, properties for sale and lease. To access these companies or for additional videos, podcasts, and articles, visit creshow.com.